All right, well, let's go ahead and begin the time of teaching. The past two times I have taught, I've been working on this idea that I've called the priesthood of King David. So on the last Sunday, a week ago, I did my introductory message to that series and tried to get you all thinking in that direction. Last time, on Wednesday night when I taught, I discussed what I call the failure of the priesthood of Aaron, which is the first really substantial message in the series. And what I was talking about last time, just to give you a quick review, I said that in the days of Samuel and David, God began to transfer the priesthood from Aaron's house to David's house. So it was very much the beginning of this idea of this transfer of priesthood that I see away from the house of Aaron, who had the priesthood by command of God, really, and then to King David, who by rights you wouldn't even think of him as a priest. But basically I made 3 points that last sermon. I said by the time of Samuel, the house of Aaron had become wicked, and I spent a great amount of time talking about the wickedness of Eli and his sons and the effect that was having on things. And then secondly, I said because of its wickedness, the house of Aaron lost the priesthood which God had promised to them perpetually. And yes, there are promises in the law of Moses that they would have the priesthood forever, but apparently those are conditional upon them actually serving God, which I think makes perfect sense. And since they were not serving God at that time, they effectively lost their priesthood. And then the third point I made was that the judgment on the house of Aaron began immediately and continued into the days of David. And I just spoke about the ways, basically the death toll that was there among the priests in Israel at that time. Now, we talk about, again, this whole idea of the faithful priest, that the man of God promised Eli would effectively take his place, and this new priesthood idea. And I already told you that I think David is that faithful priest, that King David is in some sense a priest in the book of Samuel. That's the whole gist of my argument in this series. And I began to make my first direct argument for that in this last message. I said that the house of Aaron eventually became dependent on David, just as the man of God said would happen between the house of Aaron and this new faithful priest. That particular prophet said that whenever this faithful priest finally came, the remnants of the house of Aaron would come begging to him for bread and silver and a priestly position. And you see that kind of thing in the reign of David with the priests that were still alive during his time. So that's my first direct argument, really, for David as the faithful priest. Today's sermon will give you another reason to believe that David is that faithful priest. At least I hope it will be that way. If the argument goes well today, I think you'll see even more of what I mean by that. And to do this today, I want to talk about a strange story with the Ark of the Covenant. So everything today is framed really around the history of events surrounding the Ark of the Covenant. Now, I want to make sure I have you children on board. I want to ask you children, how many of you actually know what the Ark of the Covenant is, and if anyone can actually tell me what it is? I have any brave volunteers on that? I see a couple. We'll try Jonas here. Let's do him first.
The Ark of the Covenant was in the the temple.
Mm-hmm.
It was the main thing that God made.
Okay, you're hitting it. You're hitting the idea there. So the Ark of the Covenant, basically what you have, it's a very special object. God commanded Israel to make this. You can see it described in the law of Moses when Israel came out of Egypt. It's basically a box. It's kind of like a big box. You see like maybe a chest, or a trunk or something that you carry stuff in. It's basically a wooden box, but this one is covered in gold, very decorated, made to look very nice. And inside of it you have, among other things, mainly though, the Ten Commandments, the big stone tablets that have the law of the Ten Commandments of the law written on them. Those are inside of there. And what this is, this box sits in the temple. At first it was in the tabernacle, of course, the big tent that was kind of like a temple for the people of Israel back in the day. It was in there. It was the centerpiece. It was the central portion of all of this. And what that ark really was, it represented the presence of God. And God would even meet with Moses whenever Moses was still around. He would meet with him there. God would actually appear to him above the ark and speak to him face to face in that sense. So a very special object, very important. That is what the Ark of the Covenant is. So today I want to talk about a strange story about the Ark of the Covenant. And I want to talk about that because it will actually help us see something about David, and we'll see just how he fills the role of a priest in the book of Samuel, replacing the house of Aaron. So today's sermon is called The Ark and the Priesthood, simply because it revolves around this union that is very much there between the Ark of the Covenant and the priests of Israel, and eventually the Ark in David. Now, my point is the Ark of the Covenant, as you read this strange story and as we study it, there's actually something happening there more than just these weird events surrounding the Ark of the Covenant. As the Ark of the Covenant passes from the house of Aaron to the tribe of Judah, it represents the passing of the priesthood to the house of David. And that, since that is my main point, I do want to repeat that for you. As the Ark of the Covenant passes from the house of Aaron to the tribe of Judah, it represents the passing of the priesthood to the house of David. And I want to show you this today in 3 stages, which are the 3 points of my outline. The first thing I have to do is give you some important background information. We're dealing with some pretty obscure details, so I want to make sure that the blanks in your mind are very much filled in so you can move through this story very easily. So background knowledge comes first. Secondly, this story about the ark implies a transfer of priesthood from the house of Aaron to the tribe of Judah, which, yes, is very strange because Judah is not the priestly tribe. Levi is the priestly tribe, which is why the house of Aaron has the priesthood. But we're going to see that change and move to the tribe of Judah. And the third thing I want to talk about today is that later events in the book of Samuel show how the ark confers a priesthood on David. So as we move a little further on and study where the ark goes next, we're actually going to see the priesthood go specifically to David, who is of the tribe of Judah, of course. So today, as you can tell, we're dealing with some details that don't normally get a lot of attention. I know that as I read this particular story in the book of Samuel, I always kind of read it as kind of this random stuff that was happening, kind of entertaining, maybe shows you some of God's stranger dealings with people, but never thought it was anything really important. But now I see that it very much is, and I'm going to be wrangling with those details today. I promise you the details do matter, and I am going somewhere with all of this. Just give me a little bit of patience, and I will show you what I mean as I go through my points today. So let's start with that first one, dealing specifically with some background knowledge that you need to understand the story I'm eventually going to read to you. First, I want to briefly review the events that happened just before the story I plan to read. I could read a huge chunk of the early chapters of 1 Samuel, but I don't want to do that. I just want to summarize it briefly so we can keep the sermon moving and not get bogged down in too many details. In my last sermon, we read about the priests who were the sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 very wicked sons of Eli. And we saw that at some point there was a battle with the Philistines, and the priests Hophni and Phinehas decided to take the Ark of the Covenant into battle with them. So if they're hauling it out there to the battle, they hope that God will bless them in the battle because of the presence of the Ark. After all, the Ark represents God's presence, so why not? Well, that battle went very badly for Israel. They were horribly defeated, and not only was Israel defeated in battle, Hophni and Phinehas were killed. So now the two of the leading priests in Israel are now dead. And also, worst of all, the Ark of the Covenant was stolen by the Philistines. So they captured it and took it back to their country with them, which represents a gigantic problem. If you had been living in Israel in that day, you would have had, you maybe have these theological or doctrinal issues that really trouble you as you study the Bible. Well, for them, the capture of the Ark of the Covenant would have been that, because the Ark represents God's presence. How can pagans capture God is the way you would have framed that in your mind, thinking about these things. How can this happen? This is awful. I mean, at the very least, it's awful, but more than that, it's challenging to your mind. Just, man, to see the Ark captured like that. Well, the good news is, God is much more than a box, of course, and God is able to take care of himself and is able to take care of the ark that represents his presence there in Israel, because it's not just the ark got captured, the end. While the ark was among the Philistines, God was very much afflicting the Philistines for as long as they had the ark. We don't get a lot of detail, but we get the idea that this affliction is an illness involving tumors, which are these horrible growths on your body, and then also mice are somehow involved, which just sounds revolting. But God was very much afflicting the Philistines with punishments that were very bad, to the point where the Philistines said, we've had it, we can't fight against God. Even though we beat the people of this God in battle, their God is too great for us. Let's get the ark out of here. So they send it back to Israel. And that is where our story picks up in 1 Samuel chapter 6. So I do want to actually read this passage to you. I have to get there myself. 1 Samuel 6. I'll be starting in verse 12. This is a long passage. I've been trying to trim down this stuff as much as I can do to keep things moving very quickly. But we do have to read a very long passage here. You need to hear all of this. The details are important. I'm going to start in 1 Samuel 6, verse 12. I'm going to read through chapter 7, verse 4. So it is a rather sizable chunk, but again, I think it's all necessary. Now this passage again begins with the Philistines sending the ark back to Israel, and they've decided to send it to the city of Beth Shemesh, which is going to be a very important city as we study this chapter. Now the Philistines are sending the ark back to Israel on a cart that's being pulled by some cows. So when you see this cart with some cows, that's how the Philistines are sending the ark back to Israel. Inside the cart, along with the ark, they have included some articles made of gold, and they've included, I don't know how all of these would look, but they've included some golden mice and some golden tumors, which because of the affliction God was sending on them, they figured this would be the way to acknowledge that God is doing this. We'll make these articles of gold, put them in there with the ark, send it all back to Israel, and hope that God is pleased and leaves us alone. So that is the beginning here. Let's pick up in verse 12. It says, "And the cows took the straight way in the direction of Beth Shemesh. They went along the highway, lowing as they went, and they did not turn aside to the right or to the left. And the lords of the Philistines followed them to the border of Beth Shemesh. Now the people of Beth Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley, and they raised their eyes and saw the ark, and were glad to see it. The cart came into the field of Joshua the Bethshemite, and stood there where there was a large stone. And they split the wood of the cart, and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord, and the box that was with it, in which were the articles of gold, and put them on the large stone. And the men of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrificed sacrifices that day to the Lord. When the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned to Ekron that day. These are the golden tumors, which the Philistines returned for a guilt offering to the Lord, one for Ashdod, one for Gaza, one for Ashkelon, one for Gath, and one for Ekron. Those are the cities of the Philistines, by the way. And the golden mice, according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines, belonging to the 5 lords, both of fortified cities and of country villages. The large stone on which they set the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua the Bethshemite. He, that is God, struck down some of the men of Beth Shemesh, because they had looked into the ark of the Lord. He struck down of all the people 50,070 men, and the people mourned because the Lord had struck the people with a great slaughter. The men of Beth Shemesh said, "Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? And to whom shall he go up from us?" So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, saying, "The Philistines have brought back the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up with you." And the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took the ark of the Lord, and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill, and consecrated Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the Lord. From the day that the ark remained at Kiriath Jearim, the time was long, for it was 20 years. And all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. Then Samuel spoke to all the house of Israel, saying, "If you will return to the Lord with all your heart, remove the foreign gods and the Ashtaroth from among you, and direct your hearts to the Lord, to serve him alone, and he will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines. So the sons of Israel removed the Baals and the Ashtaroth and served the Lord alone. So that is the main passage for today, and yes, it is quite a passage. But we can say a little more about it here that I think will clarify some of these details. The first important detail of this passage is about the city of Beth Shemesh, where the ark came first. So this first city where the Philistines send the ark after they decide they want to get rid of it. Beth Shemesh was a city of the priests of the house of Aaron. So if you were to go there, everyone there would be part of the priestly family, and in some way part of this priestly work that was there in Israel. I know that, first of all, because in the book of Joshua, we see after Israel conquers the land and they divide up the land, we see that cities are given to the priests where they are supposed to live. And one of the cities there listed in chapter 21 of Joshua, verse 16, is Beth Shemesh. So Beth Shemesh was, from the very beginning of Israel's time in the land of Canaan, was a priestly city. Also in our passage that I read to you here from 1 Samuel, there are Levites in Beth Shemesh. You may have noticed that in verse 15. It's the Levites who take the ark out of the cart that the Philistines had it in. That makes sense if this is a priestly city because the priests are part of the tribe of Levi, so you can expect there to be Levites around. So you see that this city, still in the days of Samuel, still has a priestly connection. This is a priestly city. I'm not sure how much the Philistines understood about the religion of Israel, and whether they understood that this was a city of priests and Levites and the ark should go there. But I can say this, it made sense for the ark to go there because it was a priestly city. This is the place where you might send the ark after you decided you don't want it anymore. So that does make sense. It is, however, the last part of this passage to really make any sense because of the rest of it gets rather odd and starts to send troubling details our way. The next thing that happens in the story is so odd because the people of Beth Shemesh send the ark to Kiriath Jearim, a different city, which is understandable. I mean, the ark was causing trouble in their city too, so you can see how they want to get rid of it, but they send it to Kiriath Jearim, which is a city in the tribe of Judah, which is different, of course, than a priestly city. This is a city from a completely different tribe. Now, we know that Kiriath Jearim is a Judahite city for two reasons. First, again, going back to the days of Joshua and the conquest of the land, and when the land was being divided up among the tribes of Israel, we can see what was given to Judah. And if you were to go to Joshua 18, verse 14, you would see that the city of Kiriath Jearim was given to the tribe of Judah. So from the very beginning of Israel's history, this was a Judahite city. There's another way to know that this is a tribe, this is a city of the tribe of Judah. Later on in 2 Samuel, if you were to read chapter 6, you see verse 2, you see that this city has another name. It's not only called Kiriath Jearim, it's also called Baale Judah, which roughly translates as the Lords of Judah, kind of a strange name for a city, but you see that it still has an association with the tribe of Judah. Baale Judah, the Lords of Judah. So even in the days of Samuel and the days of David, this city is still a city of the tribe of Judah. So we know that Kiriath Jearim is a Judahite city. If you go there, the people there are Judahites. They are members of that tribe. So it is very strange that the priests of Beth Shemesh would send the ark to a city of the tribe of Judah. You would think that after they got tired of having the ark among them and God killing them because of it, you would think they would send it to another priestly city. Because after all, this is the ark. The priests and the Levites have charge over this. They are the ones who are supposed to be caring for this object, the Ark of the Covenant. So send it to another priestly city, right? But instead, they don't send it to another priestly city. They send it to Kiriath Jearim, which is a city of the tribe of Judah. And all of that is very odd, very strange details here. But all of that is the background information that you need to make sense of what's happening in this story as the ark moves from place to place. So now I can begin to make some real points in my second segment of this sermon, which will start right now. And that is, this story about the ark implies a transfer of priesthood from the house of Aaron to the tribe of Judah. So as we follow the ark around as it's sent here and there, people trying to get rid of it because they're afraid of dying, it actually implies something about the priesthood and that it is going to the tribe of Judah, the tribe that is not the priestly tribe, but will soon find itself having that honor. Let's start with this observation. The priests of the house of Aaron lost the ark. I know I'm harping on this quite a bit, but this is a huge matter. The priests of the house of Aaron lost the ark. The ark is of such immense importance that the very thought of losing it should be worrisome. This is, in many ways, the centerpiece of Hebrew religion. I mean, everything kind of swirls around this. Do you realize that without the ark, no atonement can be made for the sins of the whole nation? The ark is very, very important for the whole idea of sacrifices and offerings and cleansing the sins of the nation in the eyes of God. I'm speaking specifically of the Day of Atonement, not just all the little sacrifices that are done throughout the year, but the big one, the Day of Atonement, where all the sins of the people are swept clean at one day of the year. You can see the regulations on this in Leviticus 16. We'll read part of this later, but for now, just remember here, when the priest does those sacrifices on the Day of Atonement, part of that ceremony is taking the blood and sprinkling it on the Ark of the Covenant. You need the Ark of the Covenant to make that atonement. If the Ark's not there, you can't sprinkle anything on it, and the question is would God hear any of our pleas? Would God forgive our sins if the ark isn't there? I mean, you got to have the ark there to have confidence that God is going to be forgiving sins here. Now, if you're a priest, one of your main jobs is to make sure that the nation is clean in the eyes of God. You're going to teach the people the law and hope they keep it, but if they don't, you got to have sacrifices and offerings to cleanse those sins. And as a priest, that's your job. It's your job to make sure that sins are forgiven by these sacrifices. So for goodness sake, keep the ark. Take good care of it. Make sure you don't lose it. You need the Ark of the Covenant for this system to work. It has to be there. And knowing all that, Hophni and Phinehas take the ark out to battle and lose it. The priests who have charge of the ark and are supposed to take care of it for the good of the whole nation and for their cleanliness in the eyes of God, lose it to pagans who hate Israel. The priests lose the Ark of the Covenant. So before going any further, ask yourself a question. I'm going to ask you a lot of times to ask yourself a question here, but ask yourself this question. Why would you trust that family, the house of Aaron, any longer with something so important? They have shown themselves completely incompetent at their primary task. It's perhaps oversimplification to say that they only had one job, but if they did only have one job, this would be it. Take care of the ark. Make sure you still have it. Make sure this sign of the presence of God is there. Make sure you take care of the ark. And here they go and they lose it. So why would you trust them any further? Public confidence in the house of Aaron should be at an all-time low now. It was already probably pretty bad because of the conduct of the priests, but now they've lost the ark. Forget these guys. They're incompetent. They cannot do this job. And yes, the problem really is greater than just the sons of Eli. We might just say, yeah, Hophni and Phinehas, they were really stupid. They lost the ark. It's not just them. It's the entire priestly house. It's the entire house of Aaron at this time. And I know that because we have a whole city of priests that proved themselves unworthy of the same responsibility. The whole house of Aaron, all the priests, had the same responsibility of conducting the religion of Israel. That regards the ark quite a lot. But we just saw a whole city of priests fail in that regard. And I'm talking about Beth Shemesh, the city where the ark goes first. If you were a priest, okay, we're going back more into priestly regulations here. If you were a priest, very important point, you are not allowed to look at the ark. You might think that since you're a priest and since you're taking care of the ark, you're allowed to look at it. No, you can't even look at it. You're not allowed to look at it. There's only one priest that gets to see the ark kind of, and that's once a year on the Day of Atonement. The high priest, when he goes into the very middle of the tabernacle or the temple, and actually does that sacrifice for the Day of Atonement. But even he cannot actually see the ark. He has to view it through the haze of a cloud of incense. And I want to read the passage from Leviticus on this, just to make sure you see the importance of this. Leviticus 16, verses 11 through 14. We'll only be here for a little bit, but it is an important passage. This is again the Day of Atonement. Then Aaron shall offer the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his household. And he shall slaughter the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself. He shall take a fire pan full of coals of fire from upon the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of finely ground sweet incense, and bring it inside the veil, which is where the ark is. He shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of incense may cover the mercy seat that is on the ark of the testimony. Otherwise, he will die. Moreover, he shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the mercy seat on the east side. Also in front of the mercy seat, he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. Okay, so even the high priest, who was allowed to enter the most holy place where the ark was, could only see the ark through a cloud of incense. He can't look directly at it. He has to view it through this haze. Otherwise, he will die. Okay? If he doesn't put that incense in there, God will kill him when he enters the holy place. This is a big deal. You're not allowed to look at the ark, even if you're a priest, even if you're the high priest. You can't do that. Now, having said all that, what do the priests of Beth Shemesh do with the ark when it comes to their city? When it comes rolling up in that cart and they start doing stuff with it, what do? They set it on a pedestal where everyone can look at it, and they look at it. That's what this city full of priests does when the ark comes to their city. Let's go back to our passage, 1 Samuel 6. Starting in the middle of verse 18 here. It says, "The large stone on which they set the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua the Bethshemite. And he struck down some of the men of Beth Shemesh because they had looked into the ark of the Lord. He struck down of all the people 50,070 men. And the people mourned because the Lord had struck the people with a great slaughter." All right, so first of all, they put the ark on this large stone, which becomes this kind of pedestal for the ark, where everyone can see it, rather than putting it in a house or in a tent or doing something to keep the ark out of view. They put it on this big stone where everyone can look at it. So that's the first thing they do. What happens next is not as clear. It's very clear that God punishes the city. I mean, the death toll there is catastrophic. I have no idea how many people lived in Beth Shemesh, but 50,070 sounds like a lot of people to die. That's what happened there. Why exactly God punished them is not as clear because of a translation issue. And I promise you this one's easier than the one I was talking about on Wednesday. The ESV, if you're reading the ESV, it says that God punished them because they looked upon the ark. And of course they were doing that because they have it on this big pedestal. And of course they're not supposed to look at the ark. So yeah, God should punish them for that. I mean, that was the threat to the high priest himself. Don't look at it or you'll die. Well, they looked at the ark and they started dying. That makes sense. If you're reading the NASB, however, it says they actually looked into the ark. So here, if that's accurate, and I don't really want to judge whether it is or not at this time, but if that's accurate, they actually went up to the ark, took off the mercy seat, opened it up and said, "Oh, I wonder what's inside." And then God starts killing them. Reasonably. Because you don't just trifle with this. This isn't just a box. It's the Ark of the Covenant. So yeah, if they looked into it, kill them one by one. This is total, complete irreverence, not just on the part of ordinary Hebrews, but priests. This is a city of priests. They should know better. If there's any part of the scriptures that they should know, it's the regulations for priests. And yet here they are just donking around with the ark. It's awful. No matter what translation you use, the people of Beth Shemesh, the priests there, just like the sons of Eli, show themselves unworthy of the responsibility given to them by God. They should not be caring for the ark. They can't handle it. They don't have the responsibility for it. But then incredibly, as we continue this story, the tribe of Judah, which again is not the priestly tribe and was never viewed as such in the law of Moses, the tribe of Judah then shows better discretion in caring for the ark than the priests did. They actually do a more priestly job than the house of Aaron when the ark comes to them. Let's look here very briefly at 1 Samuel 7:1. It says, "The men of Kiriath-Jearim came and took the ark of the Lord and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill and consecrated Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the Lord." Okay? So rather than leave the ark in the open for everyone to see, like the people of Beth Shemesh did, the men of Kiriath-Jearim put the ark inside of a house so that it was out of sight. So in the very least, they kept it out of view. No one's going to be looking at it and dropping dead because they did something with the ark that they should not. They put it in the house of Abinadab and kept it out of view. So it shows a lot more discretion in caring for the ark than the priests showed. The people of Beth Shemesh were completely irresponsible. The people of Judah actually know what they're doing somehow. They know. They figured it out. Maybe they studied up before the ark came to their city. Okay, how do you care for the ark? No one's allowed to look at it. Okay, we need someone's house. Move out if you have to, but we need somebody's house. And they kept it out of sight. Lots of discretion there. They did a better job on this very fundamental point of caring for the ark. So kids, I have a question for you now, just thinking about this. Let's say I have a job that needs done, okay? I have something that needs to happen here. And I want to put someone in charge of this. I want to make sure it gets done. I want to find someone to do this job for me. Who should I give this job? Someone that I know. You're pointing over to Jonas? Like, not you. Just not me, Stan. Just don't give me the job. The question is more general than that, okay? I have a person over here who's a complete screw-up, who never does anything right, and I know is going to fail. And I have this person over here who does a good job and knows what he's doing. To whom should I give this job? It's not hard. Selena, yes, you're right. This person over here, the person that's responsible, the person who knows what he's doing, not the screw-up. You know he's going to mess it all up. Well, tell me now, which tribe should care for the most holy object in the nation of Israel? This object that is so important, you're not even allowed to look at it. I mean, this thing that is so important, it represents the presence of God. You can put your hands down. I'm going to answer the question for you. Who should care for it? Well, you have the priests who have shown themselves recently on several occasions that they can't handle the ark. They don't know what they're doing, or they don't care. Or this tribe of people, the tribe of Judah, who actually shows some discretion and handles the ark wisely. It's obvious who should do it. I mean, give it to the tribe of Judah. They know what they're doing. They're doing it better than the priests did. They're doing a much better job. So here you have the tribe of Judah doing a wonderful job and having the ark in their possession and doing much better than the priests did, which is strange that this tribe, who is not the priestly tribe, should be doing so well with it. But there's something even stranger about this here, and that is that you even start to see the beginning of a kind of new priesthood there in the tribe of Judah. There's another detail here in 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 1. Read it again here. "And the men of Kiriath-Jearim came and took the ark of the Lord and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill and consecrated Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the Lord." They consecrated Eleazar to keep the ark of the Lord. Okay, so what does that mean? Consecrated. Well, to be consecrated means to be made holy. Okay, it's kind of like the word sanctified, to make something holy. Okay, like a priest. And if you read back in the law of Moses, when someone becomes a priest, there is this whole ceremony in which they are consecrated, even using that word. They are made holy. Well, here they take this guy, Eleazar, and they consecrate him to keep the ark of the Lord. Now, who is Eleazar? I mean, is he a priest? Is he from the house of Aaron? Is he descended from the right line of people to be a priest? Well, based on his city, no. I mean, he's there in the tribe of Judah. All things considered, it seems most likely that he's a Judahite, like everyone else in his city around him. So here they take this Judahite guy, not from the line of priests, and they consecrate him as a priest to keep the ark, which the priests ought to be keeping. Very bizarre that now you have this man who's not from the right line to be a priest being made a priest and taking over the duties of a priest right there in the tribe of Judah. Now, if Eli and Hophni and Phinehas had still been alive, they may have protested that action. But those priests were not alive. They were dead. They were dead because they were wicked and irresponsible, and God judged them for that. So they're not around to protest these actions. And there are a lot fewer priests around to protest those actions as well, because a whole city of them just got wiped out by God for their own incompetence. Something has to come in here and fill the vacuum. Here's the house of Judah, handling the ark responsibly. They need to consecrate someone to do this, so they take some guy who they think is responsible, apparently. They consecrate him. He keeps the ark, and there you have it. You have kind of this new priesthood taking root there in the tribe of Judah. Now, at some point, you may have some hesitations based on the law of Moses. It's like, Stan, but in the law of Moses, it's very clear. To Aaron and his sons were given the priesthood, a perpetual priesthood. No other tribe was given this responsibility. And everyone else is warned not to take part in these things. I mean, priestly things are special things. They're holy. You can't just jump in there. You can't just jump in there and do this and take the job away. So you may have some hesitations. Well, to ease your hesitations, two more facts for you. First, the ark was kept by the tribe of Judah for 20 years, according to the passage we just read. So for 20 years, it's there in the house of Abinadab, cared for by Eleazar, his son, who was consecrated as a priest in the tribe of Judah for 20 years. Now, God has recently shown himself quite willing to take vengeance for the ark when it is mistreated. The Philistines captured the ark, God judged them. The people of Beth Shemesh, who are in Israel, they mistreated the ark, God judged them. The ark goes to Judah, stays there for 20 years. Whereas there's this kind of, jerry-rigged priesthood set up there to make it work. I mean, where's the judgment? Did God judge Judah for this? In all those 20 years, did anything bad happen to Judah because they had the ark and had their little priest guy in there ministering to the ark? No, none of that happened. For 20 years, God was content. After the great death toll among the Philistines and the death toll among the priests, God was content for 20 years to let the tribe of Judah have the ark. So God's content anyway. Now the second fact, not only does God not punish Israel for the ark being with Judah, but Israel sees revival and victory when the ark is with Judah. After the terrible defeat at the hands of the Philistines, after the nation is so bad that even the priests are wicked, after all of that, now that the ark is with Judah, there is revival and victory. Let's pick up the story there at the end. 1 Samuel 7, verse 2. From the day that the ark remained at Kiriath Jearim, the time was long, for it was 20 years. And all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. Then Samuel spoke to all the house of Israel, saying, If you return to the Lord with all your heart, remove the foreign gods and the Ashtaroth from among you, and direct your hearts to the Lord, and serve him alone. And he will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines. So the sons of Israel removed the Baals and the Ashtaroth, and served the Lord alone. So you see two things there. You see revival. You see them put away the false gods and return to the Lord. And then there's this promise that God will deliver them from the Philistines. And you can read on in this passage about that deliverance. It's a great story by itself. We just don't have time for it. But the fact is, God did that. There was revival and victory. And the story moves straight from the ark being with Judah into revival and victory for Israel. The two are linked together, one after the other. So whatever hesitations you may have about the ark going to Judah and the priesthood that began there, just know that God had no hesitations. He was content with the ark there for 20 years and never judged anybody, and he even blessed Israel at that time with revival and victory, contrary to all the judgment that was falling on Israel before Judah had the ark. So now you see why I say this story about the ark implies a transfer of priesthood from the house of Aaron to the tribe of Judah. You have the incompetent priests losing the ark and being judged along the way for their incompetence. And then you have the tribe of Judah stepping up, taking care of the ark, consecrating a man as priest, and God blessing it. There is a transfer of priesthood there from the house of Aaron to the tribe of Judah as we follow the ark. Okay, I have a final argument, final phase of my argument for this sermon, and that is later events in the book of Samuel show how the ark also confers a priesthood on David. So now speaking specifically of David, King David, at this time, and how the ark proves that he also is viewed as a priest in the books of Samuel. Now, the events surrounding the Ark of the Covenant have brought the priesthood closer to David than to the house of Aaron. If you want to view this as a matter of physical location, the ark is in Judah and not among the house of Aaron, and is now, therefore, at the same time closer to David than it was to the house of Aaron. We must remember that David is part of the tribe of Judah. When he is first introduced in the book of Samuel, he is introduced as being from the Judahite city of Bethlehem. And David's tribe is, of course, very important for other events. He is very much of the tribe of Judah. And based on the story we've been studying today, we can say that the guardianship of the ark and some kind of priesthood belong to the tribe of Judah, which is the tribe of King David. Everything we've seen so far with the ark shows you that there is a rightful guardianship and a priesthood among the tribe of Judah, where David also is. So the events surrounding the Ark of the Covenant, they've brought the priesthood even closer to David than it was to the house of Aaron. You might imagine someone from the house of Aaron coming up and saying, well, the ark belongs to me. The priesthood belongs to me. You might ask him, well, where is the ark? Well, Judah has it. Okay, well, where is the priest that is actually ministering to the ark at this time? Well, it's some guy named Eleazar from the tribe of Judah. I mean, the house of Aaron doesn't have much of a claim at this point, but the tribe of Judah, they have claim. And guess who's part of the tribe of Judah? David. Guess who's the most prominent member of the tribe of Judah at this time? David. You can honestly say David has more of a claim to the ark and to the priesthood than anyone from the house of Aaron does. But I can go further than that. There's more to it than just what has happened so far and the ark being in the tribe of Judah in this city of Judah. We can go further in this. David actually brings the priesthood much closer to himself by bringing the ark into his capital city, Jerusalem. And here we're going to switch to a completely different passage later on in the book of Samuel, but I want to talk about this because it is linked. We're still following the ark and how the ark confers a priesthood on people, and this time it is on David. Now, after David became king of all Israel, he made Jerusalem his capital city, which he then called the city of David. All right? So even though David was born in Bethlehem, Jerusalem is the city of David. I'm going to jump over to 2 Samuel chapter 5, and you can probably go there yourself too. We'll be there for a while. So 2 Samuel chapter 5. I'm going to read verses 6 through 9, just very briefly, on David taking over Jerusalem and making it his capital. So 2 Samuel 5, verse 6, Now the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, and they said to David, You shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame will turn you away, thinking, David cannot enter here. Nevertheless, David captured the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. David said on that day, Whoever would strike the Jebusites, let him reach the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul, through the water tunnel. Therefore, they say, the blind or the lame shall not come into the house. So David lived in the stronghold and called it the city of David. And David built all around from the Millo and inward. Okay, so you see him take Jerusalem, the stronghold of Zion, which is now called the city of David. He took that from the Jebusites. He made it his capital city. Now, not long after that, David sought to bring the ark into Jerusalem with him. So not only is he making it his capital city, not only the head of the secular government, if you want to put it that way, he is moving the centerpiece of Israelite religion into Jerusalem with him. And you see this, just to read a passage here, chapter 6 of that same book, 2 Samuel 6, verses 15 through 17, just gives you a glimpse of the scene of moving the ark into Jerusalem. It says, So David and all the house of Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouting and the sound of the trumpet. And it happened as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, that Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked out of the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. So they brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent which David had pitched for it, and David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. Okay, so not only does David bring the ark into his own city, but he also properly kept the ark out of view in a tent that he pitched for it. Remember, the people of Beth Shemesh made the mistake of keeping the ark out in the open on a stone pedestal. God judges them for looking upon the ark, maybe even looking into the ark. The people of Judah at Kiriath Jearim did better. They kept the ark in a house. Well, David follows suit, and he keeps the ark in a special tent that he has pitched for it there so that it's out of view. So he does right, unlike the foolish priests of Beth Shemesh, in keeping the ark there in a tent out of view. Now here's my point with all this about moving the ark. For 20 years, the ark was in a city in Judah under the care of a Judahite, 20 years' time, and in that whole time, none of the surviving priests seem to have made any effort to challenge Judah for the control of the ark. None of the other priestly cities came and said, hey, you should give that back to us. The ark belongs to us. We're the priests. They never did that. People are content to let the tribe of Judah keep the ark for 20 years, and then after that time, you actually see a tightening of Judah's control of the ark. It was enough that they had the ark in one of their cities, but now the most prominent member of the tribe of Judah, David, has taken the ark for himself into his own capital city in a tent that he has pitched for it, and has just done this. I mean, we're going to go get the ark, bring it into my city, the city of David. You actually see a tightening of the control of the ark by the house of Judah, and specifically bringing that under control of now David in particular, is now the guardian of the Ark of the Covenant. So now the ark is very much associated with the rule of David and the city of David. And if the ark has conferred a kind of priesthood upon the tribe of Judah and that random guy Eleazar, how much more David, who is God's chosen person to be leader of Israel at this time. Now, some of you may be still a bit unconvinced that the ark has actually conferred a priesthood upon David. I know how all you naysayers are, asking me your difficult questions. Oh, Stan, what about this? Okay, well, you know what? I have a question for you this time. Okay, here's my question for you. When the ark was brought into Jerusalem, what was David wearing? Any of you remember what he was wearing at that time? 2 Samuel chapter 6. We'll back up a little bit from the passage I read before. Verse 13 and 14. And so it was that when the bearers of the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed an ox and a fatling, and David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, and David was wearing a linen ephod. So that is what David was wearing. As the ark is being brought into Jerusalem, the city of David, David is wearing an ephod. Now, for those of you who aren't sure what an ephod is, the ephod is the distinctive clothing, the distinctive garment of the high priest of Israel. It is the garment that the high priest wears as he's going about his priestly duties. I'll just read very briefly on this from Exodus. You don't have to go there. Exodus 28, verse 4. This is describing everything that Moses is supposed to do for Aaron and his sons, making them priests. It says this, "These are the garments which they shall make, a breastpiece and an ephod, and a robe and a tunic of checkered work, a turban and a sash, and they shall make holy garments for Aaron your brother and his sons, that he may minister as priest to me." So among all those things they're supposed to wear, one of them is an ephod. And you can read on there and see the actual description of the ephod. Basically, for those of you that have never read this or don't remember, it's basically a very colorful, ornamented vest. Okay, you know what a vest is? The ephod is basically that. It's very colorful, has a nice pattern on it, has some gemstones on it. It's a very colorful, bejeweled vest that the high priest wears. So this is the distinctive garment of the high priest of Israel. And I'd encourage you, when this message is over, study that word, ephod. Just look it up online or whatever. Nobody in Israel wears an ephod except the high priest and King David in this one occasion here. So you have this distinctive high priestly garment being worn by David as he's bringing the ark into Jerusalem, into his own city. It seems to me that David has brought not only the ark very close to himself, but has brought priesthood very close to himself. He's presiding over this very religious occasion in the garb of a high priest. I mean, how much more does he have to say here? I mean, he's not just king anymore. Now he's functioning as a priest. Even more so than Eleazar did. I mean, you never see him wearing an ephod, but David, he's wearing an ephod. So, all that to ask this question, this next question, who is the faithful priest? You know, we saw back there in 1 Samuel 2, this promise from the man of God speaking to Eli about this faithful priest who was going to come take his place. Well, the question is, who is the faithful priest? Who is taking the place of Eli and his sons and the house of Aaron? Well, immediately after that pronouncement is made, we see the Ark of the Covenant, the sign of God's presence in Israel, leave the care of the house of Aaron and enter the care of the tribe of Judah for 20 years. So the man of God makes his judgment. You read a little bit further, the priest loses the ark and the tribe of Judah gets it. And then after that, we see David, who is a member of the tribe of Judah, take the ark for himself, bring it into his own city, where he has a sacred tent erected for it, all while wearing the ephod of the high priest. Okay? So, who is the faithful priest in the book of Samuel? Who is the one filling the gap that is left after God basically dismisses the house of Aaron from him and replaces him with someone else? Well, it seems to be David. As you follow these events, especially following the Ark of the Covenant, it seems to be David stepping in to fill this role as the faithful priest. He gets the ark. He very much claims the priesthood by wearing this ephod. It seems like these later events in the book of Samuel very much portray David as a priest as you follow the Ark of the Covenant. So let's take this a little further. Let's take it further and backward, actually, both directions here. Forward and backward in time. Let's think about Jerusalem. Okay, so the Ark of God eventually ends up here in Jerusalem. Okay, not that surprising. It's David's capital city. It's a very important city in Israel. But let's think a little more carefully about Jerusalem. Jerusalem has many names. Okay, Zion, the city of David. We've seen all these things before. There's another name Jerusalem has. Sometimes for short it is called Salem. And if you write out the word Jerusalem, the last half of that is Salem. So sometimes it is just Salem for short. And just to show you this one passage, just Psalm 76, you don't have to turn there. Psalm 76 verse 1 says, God is known in Judah, his name is great in Israel, his tabernacle is in Salem, his dwelling place also is Zion. So Zion, of course, being one of the many names for Jerusalem, Salem also being used there. So Salem is Jerusalem. Now, if the name Salem sounds familiar to you, it's because you've probably encountered it when you encountered a man who was also a king and a priest earlier in the Bible. His name was Melchizedek. And he is a person who shows up quite prominently in some parts of the Bible. But this man named Melchizedek was both a king and a priest in the city of Salem. This was way back in Abraham's day. I'll just read you the passage from Genesis, chapter 14, verse 18. It says, And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and he was priest of God Most High. I thought he was a king. Well, he's also a priest. He blessed Abraham and said, Blessed be Abram, of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. Okay, so here you have this guy Melchizedek. He not only ruled Jerusalem or Salem as a king, but was also ministering there as priest of God Most High. He is the king priest of Salem, the king priest of Jerusalem at that time. Now, when David becomes king in Jerusalem and also brings the ark into Jerusalem, you can see that as a resuming of the priesthood of Melchizedek, who was also both king and priest in that same city 1,000 years earlier. So you have Melchizedek ruling and ministering in Jerusalem as both king and priest. And then 1,000 years later, David shows up, also king, now very much claiming the priesthood for himself by bringing the ark into his own city, wearing the ephod, ministering there as some kind of priest in the same city 1,000 years later. You see all this happening. It's a resuming of the priesthood of Melchizedek in the city of Jerusalem. So David very much takes us back in time to the days of Melchizedek. But David also takes us forward in time to the days of another man who will also rule in Jerusalem as both king and priest. And David has something to say about this in one of the Psalms he wrote, Psalm 110, which I think must be his own personal meditation on these kinds of things we've been discussing today. Psalm 110. I'll just read the whole thing to you. It's not very long. Psalm of David. It says, Yahweh says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Yahweh will stretch forth your strong scepter from Zion, saying, rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people will volunteer freely in the day of your power. In holy array from the womb of the dawn, your youth are to you as the dew. Very kingly person being described here, but he's also a priest. Yahweh has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. So both a king and a priest. The Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings in the day of his wrath. He will judge among the nations. He will fill them with corpses. He will shatter the chief men over a broad country. He will drink from the brook by the wayside, and therefore will he lift up his head. Now, those of you that know your New Testament realize that Psalm 110 is about Christ. It's about Jesus, who follows in the footsteps of his forefather David, but also follows in the footsteps of Melchizedek, who was both king and priest in Jerusalem. And of course, Jesus, when he returns especially, will be ruling as king and also as our high priest forever in the New Jerusalem. But between those 2 points, between Melchizedek and Jesus, there's another man, David. About halfway in between, actually, about 1,000 years between each stage of this. You have Melchizedek as king and priest in Jerusalem, and then David comes along and resumes the priesthood of Melchizedek, because David is also king, but also serving there in some capacity as a priest. And then later on you have Jesus, who is the greatest of them all, very much stepping into that role of the Melchizedekan priesthood as both king and priest of God's city. So in David we have a connection backward in time to the king-priest Melchizedek of Salem and forward in time to Christ, who will once again be king and priest in Salem, the city of David. So these connect into other things as well, and not just weird stories back in the book of Samuel. Okay, let's summarize all that, and we'll be done with this sermon for today. My sermon today, I called this the Ark and the Priesthood because of the connection that is there between the Ark of the Covenant and the priesthood. I said that the Ark of the Covenant, as it passes from the house of Aaron to the tribe of Judah, it represents the passing of the priesthood to the house of David. And I think in following the Ark, you can see what I mean by that and why I say it. First of all, I covered some important pieces of background knowledge, just making sure you had all the necessary information to judge these things for yourselves as you're listening to my sermon. And the two big points that I gave to you was that Beth Shemesh was a city of priests, and Kiriath Jearim, where the ark went second, was a city of the tribe of Judah. And then my second point, I said that this story about the ark implies a transfer of priesthood from the house of Aaron to the tribe of Judah. So as the ark moves from place to place, you see a priesthood get transferred as well. The priests of the tribe of Aaron, of the house of Aaron, you see them fail to care for the ark when they lose it to the Philistines, and later when they openly display it and mistreat it there in Beth Shemesh. So the house of Aaron has become totally worthless as priests, and you see them lose the priesthood to the tribe of Judah, because afterward the ark goes to them, they take better care of it, they have their own guy consecrated as a priest there to take care of it, and God blesses Israel at that time with revival and victory. So you see this priesthood get transferred along with the ark to the tribe of Judah. And then you have later events showing that the ark confers a priesthood on David, that as the ark comes to David in Jerusalem, there is a priesthood conferred upon him as well at that time. And of course, David is of the tribe of Judah, so when the ark and the priesthood go to the tribe of Judah, it comes much closer to David than it was at that time to the house of Aaron. But then David goes even further by bringing the ark into his own city of Jerusalem, which he made his capital city. David presumes to bring the ark into that city where he sets his own tent for it. He presides over this whole affair while wearing an ephod, the garment of the high priest, and it's a very priestly occasion, you see. David very much playing the part of the faithful priest who is to take the place of the house of Aaron. Just as the man of God told Eli, it seems like David is the one who is given to us in the book of Samuel as the faithful priest taking the place of the house of Aaron. And of course, in these things we have a connection backward to Melchizedek and forward in Christ, because all three of these men are king priests in the same city, Jerusalem. Okay, and that is the ark and the priesthood. That was, my second direct argument for the priesthood of David as I understand it. The next time I teach, unless I change my mind, I don't think I will, but unless I change my mind, the next time I teach, I'm going to be looking at this very well-known description of David as a man after God's own heart, and I'm going to show you that that also ties into all these aspects of priesthood that I've been talking about. So that very familiar description of David also flags him as the faithful priest taking the place of the house of Aaron. Next time. Are there any questions, even of a hostile nature, after the sermon today, or comments that can be made here at the end?